Hello and good evening from San Francisco, California. This is Uditha Devapriya here. I'm from UNU, and with me is Rumeth Jayasinghe, student from the University of Peradeniya, studying management but has a keen interest in politics and writes on politics, international relations, and economics. This is the very first episode of Economic Review, an economics and politics podcast that seeks to synthesize the two, economics and politics. Our first episode is about, guess what? Elections in Sri Lanka. Rumeth, we had elections a couple of days ago, and now we have a fresh face as our new president. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to join the fun, but how's it going in Sri Lanka now?
Yes, Uditha, first of all, thanks for having me for this interview. And it's 10:08 a.m. here in Sri Lanka, so it's good morning from Sri Lanka
Okay,
actually.
okay.
And now the election is over and the dust has settled. We have a new president, a brand new president actually. We could say Anura Kumar Dissanayake.
Hmm.
A shift from the political dynasties that we have seen for the last 76 years, and it's a fresh new government here in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
We do not know about the current how he will plan out the his government actually, but it is said that it's rumored that he will have a four-member cabinet and he will run the country for like 2 months, and he will plan to hold general elections in the coming 2 to 3 months actually. So that's the current status in Sri Lanka, and we'll see how things work out.
I mean, that's a lot within a couple of days, but then a lot has happened over the couple of weeks. How do, like, in the sense, how do you explain this change? What led to, I mean, just to give some context, this is the first left-wing head of state that Sri Lanka has seen in over 50 years, since 1970. Certainly the first under the current constitution. But what led to this? I mean, it's a complex thing, but what led to this dramatic
I
shift?
think the root cause of this change is mainly that how I see is the 2022 economic and political crisis.
Okay.
I mean that actually people were really upset with the existing political system that was prevalent at that time,
Hmm.
and they wanted a change. They didn't get what they wanted during that time. They were, I mean, burdened with all these economic hardships and the political hardships, social hardships
Hmm.
as well. And now they have given a fresh mandate, and that was the root cause. I think the 2022 economic and political crisis
Hmm.
played a huge role in this election outcome. And they want, as you said, especially in your CNA interview, it's
Hmm.
all about the anti-establishment. They want a change, and they have given the change.
They want.
And we shall see how this works out in Sri Lanka.
Yeah. So, I mean, we are trying to reduce it to a basically establishment versus anti-establishment vote.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, Andhra Kumar Dissanayake became president with a majority, but that majority didn't go beyond 50%. So how do you explain that? On the one hand, yes, he secured an expected win, but on the other hand, he didn't cross the 50% threshold. And, just for the benefit of our viewers, in Sri Lanka, if you don't cross the 50% threshold, you have to go through a second and third what is it, Rumeth? The second and third?
Second and third vote counting actually.
What
That's
counting?
preferential votes.
Yeah, so what explains this? What do you think?
It's the first time that we saw that the election going into a second round, like the runoff. I think it's called runoff in the United States,
Hmm.
but we call it preferential votes or the second counting.
Hmm.
So it's hard to say what's inside the constitution of Sri Lankan government. But this was the first time that we saw that the votes being counted for the second time, and the preferential votes. In the preferential votes, actually, AKD didn't gain much of the votes, and much of the votes were given to uh, Sajid Premadasa.
Okay.
So Sajid Premadasa got
The main
most of the
opposition
preferential.
candidate.
The main opposition candidate won the most preferential votes.
Hmm.
AKD lagged behind Sajid Premadasa. All the other candidates were eliminated from the election, and it was all about Andhra Kumar Dissanayake and Sajid Premadasa. And it turned out, but after the first round of the polls, KKD had a 1.3 million lead actually, and it was hard to call. I mean, for Sajid Premadasa, it was done and dusted. I mean, the whole Sri Lanka knew that the election was settled within the first round of polls counting as well.
Hmm. So how are people celebrating or, whatever, commemorating whatever on the streets? Was there that sort of euphoria that usually greets every election in Sri Lanka?
It's a peaceful election. Actually, this most peaceful election we had in our history. Actually, that's what's being said by the election commission and also many international media outlets.
Hmm,
It's relatively peaceful than 2019 as well. We didn't say they didn't see the magnitude of the celebrations that we had back in 2015 and 2019, but it's a new thing actually. We haven't seen peaceful elections in Sri Lanka for a long time, and this is the first time actually. I'm also seeing
hmm,
less celebrations, less violence, and it's a good thing,
hmm, hmm.
especially in a country like Sri Lanka. And we don't see this even in countries in,
Yeah,
I mean, other countries in
yeah,
South Asia,
yeah.
India, Bangladesh. You don't see that peaceful elections. Pakistan also,
Yeah,
and
because
it's good that
definitely
Sri Lanka.
yeah, definitely there's a lot of, chaos and turmoil that comes out of those elections.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, even a smaller country as Sri Lanka, it's incredibly complex because you have different voting patterns across different regions. I
Yeah.
think part of the analysis which we can focus on right now is how voting patterns played out between, those different regions and parts of the country. Maybe you can shed some light on it.
Yeah, so I'll start with Colombo. Now, the Colombo, actually, the overall result, AKD got 47.21% of the Colombo votes. That's 629,963 votes.
Okay.
And Sajid Premdas came in second with 25% of the vote, and RW Ranil Wickremesinghe came with 21.09% of the vote.
Okay.
And actually, this is a change from there were major shocks, not shocks, actually shifts in Colombo as well, especially Borel, which was won by Sajid Premdas back in 2019, was won by Anukumar Dissanayake, and then Colombo East, a stronghold of the UNP back in the 80s and also in up until the 2015 or 19 election rather.
Mm-hmm.
It was also won by Anukumar Dissanayake. So there was definitely a shift in the political paradigm in Colombo,
Mm,
and but the suburbs voted heavily for Anukumar Dissanayake, and he won it by a huge margin. Huge margin that Gotabaya Rajapaksa didn't even get back in 2019.
mm,
So this explains the sentiment of the middle class of Sri Lanka. They
mm.
wanted a change. They wanted something outside the political dynasties that we saw back for the last 76 years. And the Colombo suburbs and the middle class delivered it.
Mm. So, yeah, but then beyond Colombo, other regions, the north, the south, what were the voting patterns like then in a general?
All, I mean, the southern part of Sri Lanka, it was all AKD. So it was an AKD view. We can call it as an AKD view.
Mm,
He simply took Hambantota by storm and Galle by storm, also Madara by storm.
mm,
And if you take Hambantota, which is a stronghold of the Rajapaksa family, they were simply wiped out of the electorate. I mean, AKD didn't give them a chance to stand out in areas like Tangal. Then if you go into Beliat, you know how those voting patterns, I mean,
What they used to be.
acted back used to be what it used to be back in 2015, 2010, 2015, and 2019. No, I mean, if anyone except Rajapaksa didn't get many votes, but this time around, Rajapaksas even lagged behind Ranil Wickremesinghe
Hmm,
in the Hambantota electorate. So definitely there has been a change in the southern part as well.
hmm.
And if I go into the Jaffna, the northern part of Sri Lanka, this is where the votes split out for Sajid Premadasa, Arya Nethiran, and Ranil Wickremesinghe. They didn't get much of the votes in northern
So,
parts of Sri Lanka.
so
So
just to stop you there, northern and eastern province, and particularly northern province, we had not just Sajid Premadasa as, the candidate preferred by the Tamil minority parties, but also a Tamil common candidate.
common candidate, but certain, I mean, ITK and not the whole ITK, certain part of the
ITK,
ITK backed Arya Nethiran.
the ITAK being the largest Tamil political party in Sri Lanka. So
Yeah,
there was, I mean, obviously these are just rumors, but they supported Sajid Premadasa, yes, but a consortium of different Tamil parties also put forward this common candidate. So did
yeah.
that, in your opinion, do you think that split the vote in favor of Anur Kumar This? I mean, he didn't get majorities in these
Yeah,
regions, but
it certainly did because I think Sajid Premdas expected more votes from Jaffna, Vanni, and all the other northern parts of Sri Lanka,
Hmm,
but he didn't get as he expected. Now, if I take Jaffna back in 2019,
hmm.
he got 83% of the vote, but this time around, Sajid Premdas got only 32.60% of the vote.
So that's a
So
huge
the
slide.
results speak the outcome. I mean, the results do speak some. facts and figures in northern part as well. And one thing to note also, there was less water turnout in Jaffna and Vani areas as well.
I see.
That's another shift in the political spectrum if you consider the northern part of Sri Lanka.
And I mean, for an election cycle that was dominated by anti-establishmentism, if you may
Yeah,
call it, voter turnout wasn't as high as the last election. I mean, last
yes.
election it exceeded, I think,
Last
80%. This
80,
one,
83% back in 2019. This time around, it was between 75% and 80%. I think 77% is the estimated voter turnout
so
for this election.
not to, bring down, not to demean Mr. Dissanayaka's achievement, but, it's not that kind of a landslide which we saw in 1994, 1990, sorry, 1977,
Seven.
1994, and of course
So
2019. Um,
initially, it looked like it was going to be a landslide for AKD. I mean, the first after the postal votes came, AKD swept all the postal votes, and everyone expected IKD to win by a landslide, but that did not happen.
hmm,
As the votes came in and as the results came in, it looked like it was going to be. But at one time, it looked like it was going to be close. But after these Colombo, Gampa, and Kurunagal votes came in, AKD got a 1.3 million gap against Sajid Premdas. So that we saw some shifts in the results as well. But no landslide for AKD, but still he won the election.
he won the election, yes. So these regions that you mentioned, I mean, these were obviously, strongholds of the previous president, the president before the previous president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his family, Kurunaga, the south, and so on and so forth. They've shifted en masse to, AKD. There's no denying the fact that, the economic crisis has led to that. But, my next question would be, um, how do you see the economy playing out in the future? Not in terms of what it might become, but in terms of what AKD might do. I have my own take on it, but I'd like to know what your take is.
Yeah, the first thing first, I think the IMF did mention about AKD today that
Mm,
they are willing to work with the NPP government.
mm,
And the first thing that way they will discuss is the third review of the IMF program, which is the
okay.
extended fund facility.
Mm,
So they haven't released the third tranche yet because they delayed it. They were expecting it to release before the election, but it was delayed after. It was delayed because of the election. Now they expect it to release in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, but first they will hold talks with them, and AKD has pledged that he will make some negotiations, some adjustments with the IMF program.
mm,
The previous president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, said that it's impossible to make adjustments, but AKD's government is quite strong with their stance and they want to make some uh, adjustments, especially with regard to the burden of the poor segments of Sri Lanka. They want to soften the austerity measures that
mm,
the
mm.
IMF has imposed on the several I mean, especially the water poor segment of the Sri Lankan economy.
Yeah.
So it's yet to be tested, and we shall see how things pan out. And he has also pressed tax reduction
Mm.
in the coming weeks as well.
So, it's an interesting combination of, it's interesting, trajectory of a party that was once seen as left wing, but is now, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, it's now moving away from the left towards the center. But that's what happens when you enter parliament in an electoral democracy. You are forced to actually reckon with different groups. It's interesting that the only candidate that called for a complete exit of the IMF is a party, basically he's from a party that isn't in parliament. So that just shows that basically when you're in parliament, you have to moderate yourself. So in
Yeah,
that sense, yeah,
let me add 2 points to the economic segment. Now, immediate changes that they have pledged in their, I mean, they mentioned in their policy document was to reduce the pay tax from 36% to 24%,
okay.
and the VAT being removed from the food items, healthcare services, and educational books.
Hmm.
It is uncertain whether they will do it or not, but they have strongly said that they would do these two measures in the immediate future.
But no tax cuts like under the
Tax
previous.
cuts, especially the pay tax, they won't reduce the pay tax. Corporate tax and other taxes, they haven't mentioned anything about them yet, but they have strongly said we are going to reduce taxes, we are going to make adjustments to the IMF program. So those are their strong stances about the Sri Lankan economy.
Yeah, I think they are going to approach it from a, negotiating perspective rather than a sort of we are going to exit it and we are just going to get rid of its perspective.
Yeah.
But this leads to my last section, which is on foreign policy. I think we've heard very little about what each candidate has had to say about foreign policy. Least of all, obviously, from the opposition, because they'll be more concerned about scoring points against the government, which was very unpopular in the previous government. But how is the NPP looking like with foreign policies?
Foreign policy, yeah. So the first things first, if you take look at the well wishes that Anukumar Disana got.
Hmm,
I mean, he got wishes from Muizu, Modi, China, Japan, U.S. State Department, Julie Chang, and including President of Kenya, UAE, Australia High Commission. So he got the well wishes, but it was in China and India who reacted first to AKD's win. AKD visited the High Commissioner meeting Santosh Jha, the High Commissioner of India, and also met Chinese ambassador
hmm,
as well. So India and China were the first to react, and that shows that they want to keep their influence within Sri Lanka and the Indian Ocean region as well. But we shall see how things play out.
I
Now
mean,
India has, I think India does have the upper hand. India already before the elections, actually 5 months before the elections, they invited AKD to India, and now China also putting their stronghold on the NPP government. That's how I see.
okay. But obviously, a lot has happened over the last 48 hours, and I think there's a lot to cover because we don't know what's going to happen until maybe another 2 weeks' time or so. But I'm sure I mean, you come from a particular background, I come from a particular background. We've talked a lot about the future of the NPP in terms of the government it's heading now and left-wing politics. But what about the future of, the right in Sri Lanka, represented not just by Ranil Wickremesinghe, the previous
Right,
president, but
there
also
was a
the
development
SJP.
yesterday that the UNP calling out all the opposition parties, I
Hmm,
mean every party except NPP, to form an alliance and face the general elections. Though
hmm,
it's, I don't know whether it's a rumor or a confirmed. I mean, it's news first confirmed it on Facebook,
hmm.
and it is being widely speculated by the general public as well. So if they are going to form an alliance, that's going to, I can't exactly say how this will turn out in the Sri
Yeah,
Lankan political arena, but certainly right wing, it's I mean it's evident even in the results. The split has caused the right wing alliance to lose votes. Ranil
hmm,
Wickremesinghe coming from one end and Sajid Premadasa coming from one end. If they actually combined together, the outcome would have been different. But whatever has happened now.
yeah.
My opinion is, if they are to face the elections, they should get together, keep Podujana Peramuna and other left-wing political parties aside.
Yeah,
SJB and the independent Ranil Wickremesinghe party, they should get together and form the UNP
but
government, no, the government, UNP party that faced elections back in 2010, 2015. How they worked back in 2015, they should get back together and see how the results will come
yeah.
out.
So obviously, a strategy for the right would be to get together, but then those are strategies. Now, those strategies have to be, combined with other factors, namely the fact that there's this rift between, the SJB and the UNP that will probably never heal. We haven't had an official response from the SJB about this, but it's very
But
clear that, yeah.
yeah, Ashu Maru Singh actually had an interview with the with several media outlets after the election commission post conference, and he said that he always advocated for a united UNP party, not a divided UNP party, and he wants back that united UNP party to face the upcoming elections. So this is what they say. They want to get together, but it's up to Sajid Premadas and SAB. They should say whatever
Yeah.
they want, and they should act first before Ranil Wickremesinghe act, I guess.
I guess, yeah. But, as of now, Ranil is not in the best of, health in terms of his politics. He's basically,
70, 76 or 77, he will
yeah.
be
No,
80 years old if then.
when I say state of health, I mean in terms of politics, because he was kicked out again, yet again. He's been kicked out multiple times. So he's been seen as the great savior of center-right or right-wing politics. But my last question would be, all this has a bearing on one thing, which is that, and this is something I welcome a lot, Sri Lanka has seen elite politics for a long time, and rightly or wrongly, and I think rightly, AKD is seen as a sort of outlier, sort of outsider. He's not from an elite school, he's not from an elite background, and that's a big tribute to our education and electoral system.
And he's part of the free education system.
Yes, he is. Not that we didn't have, like I said, we did have non-elite presidents before, but my final point, and I basically want to ask you this: why is AKD so special when we've had non-elite presidents, one or two, not more than that? I would say two, Ranasinghe Premadasa, and I would say Maithripala Sirisena before. What makes AKD so special, apart from the fact that he's from a different party?
Simple answer that I would give is his corruption stance. Now, Ranasinghe Premadasa back in 80s, I think he didn't say about anything about corruption, that he was going to end corruption. But
Yeah.
AKD came with a clear view. I want to end corruption in the political system of Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
I want to create a change, and that's the change that he intends to create.
Hmm.
Make this clear. Even in his first speech as the president, he said, we need to have a clear political system in Sri Lanka. I think that's what differentiates him from the other candidates, and also specialize. That's the specialty about AKD as well.
Okay, I think, and once again, anti-establishment, anti-corruption, and a change, a major change. So I think all those factors can work in the country's favor, may not work in the country's favor. I certainly hope it does, because as someone who's basically been out and out, following Anukumar Dissanayaka's political trajectory, this is interesting, but it's definitely not, surprising. He was bound to get there sooner or later. But your final words, and then we can wrap up.
He was bound to get the president. He was considered the favorite to win this election.
Hmm.
But if you go to 2019, did you expect AK to win this election? Did you expect even AK to be the front runner of this election?
I
My
said,
answer would be no. What do you
yeah.
think?
I certainly expected him to get much, his party to get much more than what he did in 2020 at the parliamentary election, but they got only 3 seats. That was a shock for all of us, but we were all swept up. Sri Lanka was swept up by, number one, security fears. Number two, the first wave of the pandemic, people thought that the then government did a pretty good job. And to a certain extent, there were certain measures taken that seemed to be good, but it was on the strength of all those factors that they got a massive majority, the SLPP. We know what happened after that. It's in a way, it's a good thing that an outright majority didn't come, because that sort of previous experience shows that whenever an outright majority came, it was followed by, a sort of abuse of power. But we are seeing something different now. We are seeing a modest victory, a victory nevertheless, for AKD and his party. And it was very clear that they would get to this position, but it was only clear from I would say 2023 onwards, not before. So you are right in a big way.
And the next thing that the the NPP government, actually now they are the government, no, they
Yeah.
need to consider is getting young people and fresh new faces to the parliament. That's what everyone is asking from the NPP. We
Hmm.
need to kick out all these old guardian
There is that perception. Yeah.
elites from the political system, and we need fresh new faces, especially the youngsters.
Hmm.
This is what people have advocated for a long time, though it hasn't been answered yet,
Hmm.
and that's why they have given NPP the mandate to change that system and get more young people, fresh faces, energetic faces to the parliament.
Well, there's a lot to hope for, but hope is something we can definitely engage in. Thank you so much, Rumeth, for your time, and thank you everyone for joining in, or rather tuning in to our first episode. Rumeth, any final words before we wrap up?
The last final, actually, there are not a lot to say, but I do hope that this new government will do something new, and I want to see something new as well.
Hmm.
And it's a fresh new Sri Lanka. It's a new Sri Lanka actually. Now we have come to a new era, and let's see how things work out. Certainly, hope for the best.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Rumeth. And from San Francisco, here's me saying good night, and I think it's good morning from there in Sri Lanka. Um,
Thank you, Uditha, for having me on this interview, and also I also thank our viewers for tuning with us for the last 30 minutes. And we certainly hope that you have enjoyed our podcast, and we will be bringing more content in the coming months and weeks as well.
yeah. So here's me saying goodbye. Thank you so much, Rumeth.
Goodbye, Uditha, and have a nice day. Bye.
You too.